Transportation for 25 years. She started out in the comptroller's office as the cashier. She has her bachelor's degree in accounting. She has worked her way up to be the department's comptroller, finance director. She has been the finance director since October of 2009. Please give your attention to Becky. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for attending the session. How lucky am I to get everybody right after lunch and to talk about accounting. So to keep you all from falling asleep, I'm going to try something. I bought these candy bars off of my daughter-in-law, who's a school teacher. And I bought 20 of them to be helpful. So I don't eat them all. I'm going to give them out to you. But I'm going to quiz you to keep you awake. So as I go through my slides, I'm going to quiz you through them, and whoever first one raised their hand answers the question right, get a candy bar. Hope that's okay. So to kick things off, can anybody recite UDOT's vision? Anybody? How many UDOT employees do we have? Okay, Sean, your hand was up first. Candy bar. Good job. Good job. Good job. Thank you. Okay, so transportation funding, where does it all come from? Well, our funds really come from 4 different sources. We have the Transportation Investment Fund, which was created for highway capacity projects. The Transportation, did I say Transportation Fund? Transportation Investment Fund, okay. And the Transportation Fund is where we, it's where we have the money come in for our day-to-day operations, for, our maintenance, preservation, our admin, and then we have the federal funds and aeronautics funds. So I'm going to go through each one of these. I'm going to go through where the revenue sources come in, how it's spent. So in the Transportation Fund, it's the majority of it, 75% of it is made up of motor fuel and special fuel. Some motor vehicle registration fees and some permits, special permits and fees. Now these 3 sources of funds, they're constitutionally protected, and you'll hear that because it can't be cut from our budget. The Constitution says that these 3 sources have to be spent on the roads. And as you can see, the Transportation Fund also has 9% sales tax. Now, sales tax is not constitutionally protected, and it can be taken. Sales tax can be used for things like education, Medicare, Social Security, things like that. So here I have a history. Since majority of our funds for the transportation funds comes from motor fuel, have a history here. It shows you how much revenue we've generated since 2005. And as you can see, we took a spike from 2006 to 2007, but then during the recession of 2007 to 2009, our revenue really fell. Today, motor fuel is estimated to grow about 1.5% each year, but as you can see, from 2012, it really has only grown less than 1%. So I showed you the percentages of how that revenue comes to us. This slide shows you the dollar amount. So motor fuel, it's estimated in fiscal year 16 to come in at about $285 million. Special fuel, 116. What I like to show on this is you have the motor fuel, special fuel, motor vehicle registration, and then you have the list of permits and fees. That comes to $488 million. And that total is important because that's where we break out for our local city, our city and county roads. They are called B&C roads, and right off the bat, we have to take 30% of that $488 million and give it out to the cities and counties. We do have some sales tax coming into the transportation fund. The 1/16 sales tax was actually a trade-off that we received that because in the past, B&C roads only received 25% of the motor fuel and special fuel, and they wanted 30%. So as compensation, we were dedicated the sales tax of the 1/16. The .025 came to us to address choke point projects. This gives us a total of $535 million into the transportation fund, of which 82 million of that is transferred out into the transportation investment fund. The significance of this is back in 1997, the last time, besides this last session, that they increased the fuel tax, they increased it by a nickel. And that was dedicated not to go to the transportation fund, but to go to the transportation investment fund for highway capacity projects, which that leaves the transportation fund with only $452 million to be spent out of that fund. So, knowing how much money we have, what are we doing with it? How is this money spent? Well, actually, I think this is the time for candy. Can anybody tell me what source, a revenue source, or we get from the transportation fund? There you go. You help me, Janet. Good job. Okay. See, got to keep you guys awake here. This stuff could be pretty dull right after lunch. Okay, so how do we spend the money? Well, here are our line items. So the governor, back in December, the governor will release his budget, and he will appropriate that money that we estimate to get into the transportation fund to these line items. You'll see 6% of it will go to support services. Support services is where we house comptroller's office, internal audit, our communications department, risk, procurement. We have 3% going to engineering services, 22% to operations. Now, operations is where we do the day-to-day activities of, litter pickup, snow plowing. The IMT group is there. The TOC is there. 16% to construction management line item. The construction management line item has 0 people in that line item. This is where we do all of our preservation and rehabilitation for projects. And then you'll see 26% going to B&C roads. 15% is that 82 million that I talked about. That goes out to the Transportation Investment Fund. This slide just is here to point out that with 43% of our transportation funds being transferred out, this only leaves us 300 million to be spent by UDOT. So here's a recap. We are a balanced budget state, which means we cannot appropriate, the legislators, the governor's office, they cannot appropriate more than what we get. So the estimated revenue, 535 million, that's all that they can appropriate to our line items. The only time our budget increases is if we receive a merit, if our health insurance goes up. We start each year on just like how we ended the previous year. It doesn't get bumped up unless there's an increase to like I said, our health insurance, retirement, or if we get any merits. So what do we do when we need more money? I mean, this is all we get. This is all we have coming into the transportation fund. There's at times, we're building new roads. How do we maintain those roads when there's only a limited source of funds? What we do is we say, well, this year we need some more snowplows. So we reallocate the existing funds that we have. We go to the legislature, first go to the governor's office, then we go to the legislators, and we say, okay, we need more money in the equipment line item. Can we just reallocate that? And when we reallocate the money, it all comes from the construction line item. So you'll hear, if we have to give more money into a certain line item, we're taking from the roads, right? Because in the construction line item, that's where we have our preservation program. Who was all here yesterday to hear Carlos speak? Did you guys hear him talk about the new gas tax? Pretty exciting stuff. So we haven't seen a gas tax since 1997, and even when we received that, it was going for highway capacity projects. So this is the first time we've seen an increase to our budget for maintaining our roads. So in the past, we didn't have enough money, so we had to choose. We had to take care of some roads better than we did others. So of course, we're going to take care of our interstates. Then we classified our roads into 2 different categories, level 1 roads and level 2 roads. Level 1 roads who had high volume, we took care of those. We had more proactive treatment in taking care and preserving those roads. Level 2 roads, not as high volume on those roads. So we really did reactive treatment to those roads. And so in the past, we've only had 14% of that revenue going towards pavement preventative maintenance. With this new gas tax, it's given us an extra 21% for a total of 35% going to our roads. So we no longer have to treat them different. Now we have a sustainable system. We can take care of all our roads now thanks to that gas tax. It's just to be clear, the gas tax did not go, the increase did not go for the people, right? It didn't go to any of the other line items except for the construction line item, which is for preservation rehabilitation. Can we go back to that one? Just also want to point out that 28% of those funds going to the construction line item we use for our federal match. I thought this graph would be interesting. Everybody wants to know how much money that means, how much money is we're going to get from the new gas tax. Well, it doesn't go into effect, the law doesn't go into effect till January, so we'll only expect to see about $24 million, of which UDOT is expected to receive 17. B&C Roads gets 30%, they get 7 million. But next year, it looks to increase by 75 million. So UDOT receiving 55 million. You heard Carlos talk yesterday about 55 or 40 million going towards pavement, and then 15 going towards our bridges. So this is great. This is great news for UDOT. Now to talk about the Transportation Investment Fund. Again, this is the fund that was created to take care of highway capacity projects. Time for more candy? I have my little notes so I can remember. Going too fast here. So how about, can anyone tell me how the money is spent in the transportation fund? At one line item. Okay, in the back? What's that? Yeah. Anybody else? Another line item? Nobody's listening to me.
New construction on roads and buildings.
Better give Ron one too. He looks hungry. Okay, so the Transportation Investment Fund. Boy, there's some history here. The Transportation Investment Fund, which is totally opposite of the Transportation Fund because it's mostly made of sales tax. And again, sales tax isn't constitutionally protected. So each year, we are at a risk of losing some of that sales tax to go back to education or wherever it is that is needed in the other departments. But 13% of that, it comes from the motor fuel. That's that 82 million that I was talking about coming over from the Transportation Fund. And then 12% motor vehicle registration. But there is quite the history of sales tax earmarks going into that fund. As you can see in the green, this is all the sales tax going in. Now, we used to, back in the day, have 3 different funds to track. We had the Centennial Highway Fund, Critical Highway Needs, and the Transportation Investment Fund. And the 8.3% of that sales tax was going into the Centennial Highway Fund back, I think that started in 2006. And, we were bonding, we were trying to do some big highway capacity projects, and those earmarks were dedicated for that fund until those bonds were paid off and those projects were done. But a couple of years ago, a bill was ran to combine all of those funds, and so now we are left with TIF, the Transportation Investment Fund. So with each one of these, you can see the 90 million was originally going into the Centennial Highway, or the Critical Highway Needs Fund. The .025 sales tax was going into the the Critical Highway Needs Fund. And then in 2011, a bill was passed to give us 30% of the sales tax growth. Our legislators realized that, our population's growing. We need money for new roads, highway capacity roads. And so they said, UDOT needs money for roads, for highway capacity. So let's go ahead and give them 30% of that increase in sales tax until that 8.3% it turns into 17%. And the reason they believe UDOT should get 17% of that sales tax is because Becky Lockhart ran a tax force a few years ago that they said, they looked at all of the sales tax in Utah and they said, really, 17% of that sales tax is auto-related. So if it's auto-related, it belongs on the road. And users of the road should help pay for the roads. So it's believed that UDOT, it's okay that we're getting these sales tax, even though they're not constitutionally protected for the roads, that UDOT receives this sales tax. And but right now, if you look at all of them, we're really receiving about 20%, not 17. So each year, they're looking at ways to maybe cut this budget a little bit, but there's plenty coming in. We also have the 2009 registration increase and 1997's registration increase. Both of those times that they increased motor vehicle registration, it went directly into the TIF. So how do we spend the money in the Transportation Investment Fund? We spend it two ways, just on projects and on to pay back our bonds. 57% of that to pay back bonds. This next this is a list of our current TIF projects. Of course, we have Mountain View. We've got a couple of projects on actually 3 different intersections on Bangor Highway that we're going to be working on. This is just a short sample list of the types of projects that this money is being spent on in the Transportation Investment Fund. The list goes on, and I think Bill can contest that we don't want to look at that, right? It's too long. This graph, I think, is really important because a lot of people will say, wow, 57% you're paying back bonds. That's a lot of money to be going towards the bonds. But I like to show this graph to show that our revenue is increasing. Sales tax increases faster than motor fuel and a lot faster than your vehicle registration fees. So with that, you can see our revenue climbing and our bonds are getting paid off. They should be paid off by the year 2029. That brings us to federal funds. Oh, question. We got some candy. I got a lot of candy I got to give away. You guys, help me out. What is a revenue source from TIF? Good job. Anybody else? I don't want to eat these candy bars later, so. Is there another one?
Car registration.
There you go. Thank you. What are the 2 categories that we spend the money from TIF in? Remember I said there was just 2 categories we spend that money?
Bonds.
There you go, bonds. 2 of them. There was one over here and one back here in the corner at the hat, the ball cap, yeah. I don't mind helping out when they're having, I don't mind helping out my daughter-in-law and buying these candies from her, but I don't want to eat them. Okay, so federal funds. We have about $307 million coming to the Transportation Fund. We retain 80% of it, 20% is passed through to the locals. And then, do you remember me talking about in the construction line item, we reserve some of that money to be the federal match, to keep on for federal match? So we take that match, state match money with the federal funds. UDOT gets to spend $269 million a year in federal funds, and our, your title is finance, Director of Finance, right? Program Finance. Gets to actually prioritize these projects and put the money to be spent 41% on rehabilitation, 13% on choke point projects, 11% on major rehabilitation. Which leaves us with 1% of our budget left to talk about. Aeronautics. I worked out at Aeronautics for about 3 years, and before I applied for that job, I had no idea we had state planes. Does everybody know we have state planes? Does anybody not know? Does everybody know that we have a ferry too? We don't want to talk about the ferry. Oh no! Here, give Tim a candy bar. Timmy's in the back row. So aeronautics. Aeronautics is made up of aviation fuel tax, aircraft registration fee, and dedicated credits. Now what a dedicated credit is, is we have other agencies paying us to use our planes. We have 4 pilots, 3 mechanics that take care of our planes. Our mechanics also take care of public safety's helicopters and wildlife's plane. Our strongest user is the University of Utah. They have doctors that like to take the plane because they donate their time to take care of children in rural areas. And had it not be for the planes, they may not be able to dedicate so much time to these children because they would have to drive to and from and take 3 days rather than taking the state plane, and they can get there in 1 day. So this really helps out those children in the rural areas that have special needs. Department of Health also is our number 1 user. We have 3 planes, the 8-passenger King Air, which is a rental rate of $900 per hour. 6-passenger King Air is $775 per hour, and then we have a small Cessna that's $195 per hour. So like I said, I got to work there for 3 years, and I think it was in 2002, 2001, I flew with our director out there to San Jose to pick up Lieutenant Governor Mike Leavitt, and that was pretty interesting. It was pretty fun experience. He liked Oreo cookies and Diet Coke. We used to have snacks on the planes until we had budget cuts. So aeronautics, how is that money spent? That money is spent 7% to administer the program. 48% really is just pass-through funds. That goes back to the local airports. That's collecting the aviation fuel tax. Civil Air Patrol, only 1% of that budget goes to the Civil Air Patrol. It's about $80,000. The Civil Air Patrol provides state and emergency services. It participates in search and rescue missions as directed by the Air Force Rescue Coordination Center. And so they really appreciate any help they can get, and so that $80,000 helps them out quite a bit, even though it looks like such a small amount. Aid to local airports, that generates about $20 million that goes out back to the locals from their fuel tax. Airplane operations is where we track the pilot's time and our mechanics, and any of the maintenance for the airplanes and parts. So that brings me to the very end. I've got Janet here to help me with any questions, and Ryan, and I've got Bill, our federal guy. So if you guys have any questions on UDOT budget, I wasn't sure how many folks would be in here that were UDOT, or how many would be consultants just wondering how much money we're going to have into the future. I know a couple of years ago when we were showing this, we were showing that 2016, 2017 was going to be low years, and I kind of frightened some people, but I hope you can see from this presentation that we're looking good, and UDOT's definitely the place to be. So is there any questions? None, not even for Janet? Okay, there we go.
You talked about a new gas tax.
Mm-hmm.
I know Senator Wayne Harper has tried to introduce legislation where it would increase every few years.
Yeah.
How did this work?
Yeah, okay, so it is very confusing, and I have some notes on that. The gas tax. So the gas tax is really, it's following the CPI index. Okay, so what we have here is the gas tax has always been 24.5 cents per gallon. And what they decided was they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have a ceiling and we're going to have a floor. The ceiling, we're going to say that it can't reach more than $3.33. But say prices fall, we can't charge less than $2.45, right? Because that's what the gas tax is right now at the rack. So to create this moving floor, they said that the floor will increase annually with the consumer price index. So there's been discussion, and I think that's been the biggest confusion right after the bill was ran was who is going to decide what the gas tax is, because you have to take the average amount of the gas at the rack, gas tax at the rack. So you take that average price, you take that, you times that by 12%. That gives you your new gas tax. But again, the average price at the rack can't be higher than $3.33, and it can't be lower than $2.45. And I know you got that, right? I will give somebody a candy bar if they can repeat that.
So what he's saying is if it goes above or below those points, then we just get the original gas tax.
Right, right. So right now, say the gas tax at the rack, the average gas tax is $2.45. You times that by 12%, that gives us our new gas tax of 24 cents. So, I'm sorry, 29. And so that's why they're saying it's a nickel. We're looking at a nickel gas tax. And it looks like it's really not going to hit that ceiling until 2033. So,
When you say the average, is it an average of different cities?
no,
Average of,
yeah, 3 years, the past 3 years. Oh, no.
there's 3 collection points there of distribution.
Do you want to come up?
This is
You guys, this is Janet Stedman. She's our our budget officer.
So my understanding is that there's 3 collection points that they're looking at. So it would be an average of the cost at those 3 different locations of where it's at the rack.
So it could be Salt Lake, St. George.
Somewhere, yeah, there are 3 across the state.
No? Yes?
So there's billboards encouraging us to vote for, excuse me, Proposition 1, which is an increase in, I believe, the sales tax in the rural areas. How does that factor in?
Well, again, we only see the sales tax, we only benefit from the sales tax if it's part of the 17% that's auto-related. So,
It says it's for local roads.
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, part of that bill that passed this gas tax had some options in there that the cities and counties can impose a sales tax for their roads. Yeah, so we won't see any of that money from UDOT. UDOT won't see that money. That'll go directly to the cities and counties. Good questions. I think he deserves a candy bar for that. I have a couple more to give away, so. Thanks, Janet. Yes?
When you fill up your car, is that rack, just the rack?
No. No.
But I have another question. But I just
Okay.
want to know what the rack is. So is the, like, it says how much the federal tax is that tax that you pay at the pump, what goes into the federal pool that we then get back?
I think Bill wants to answer that question for you. Oh, it's at the rack as well. Okay. So yeah, the money that's paid, that goes to the federal government is charged at the rack. I wish I had the graph. Linda Hull has a great graph that shows, the way it was explained to me, you have the refinery, right, Bill? And it's not at the that's not the rack. So you have the refinery sells it to the rack. There you go. And then from there, so like special fuel is, the taxes is paid right there at the rack, okay? Motor fuel is not, right? So motor fuel from the rack, it goes out to your different, Chevron and different places that purchase this oil. And then they pay the taxes and pay that back. So whatever the average price of gasoline is at the time at the rack is how they're basing this new gas tax out.
The rack is where they actually load the trucks.
That's going, yeah, thank you, Ron.
They pass it on. So I mean, you
Yeah.
see it at the pump, and you see those little stickers that tell you how much that is at the pump. But it's paid for by the guys that buy it, that bring it to the pump.
Good questions. Good questions. And anything else? I think we'll give her. Clear as mud? All right. Well, thank you all so much for attending. I know you're not going to be too heartbroken if we leave a little early. So, thank you.